Hi, I'm Ambar Cordova. I am a romance author of emotional stories, including the Baker Oaks series of interracial and multicultural small town stories. I'm so happy to be here.
Welcome to Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. This is a soft space to explore romance and books where no topic is too taboo. I'm your host, Casey, and this week I'm sitting down with author Ambar Cordova for a conversation about the many layers to intimacy and vulnerability, our shared love for very human, very flawed characters, and why representation of body diversity, chronic illness, and mental health experiences in romance can be both healing and wildly swoony. Ambar also opens up about boundaries, self-awareness, and how fiction can nudge us towards self-acceptance without shame. And make sure to stay until the very end to hear the beautiful love letter that Ambar wrote for her readers. She actually had us both in tears. Ambar, welcome to the Love Letters and Books podcast. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here.
So the last time that you and I spoke, we had the best podcast pre-production call of my entire life because you asked if we could have a pasta making podcast pre-production call. You were such a good sport about it too, because I decided I wanted to make sweet potato gnocchi, which is my favorite pasta, but I never checked in with you. Did you actually end up eating it?
So I realized that I don't actually like gnocchi that day. It's fine. I didn't even think about it until later on, but I did cook it. My family ate it. My husband ate all of it. And he pretty much was like, "Oh, you don't like gnocchi? It's fine. I will eat all of yours." I thought it was the sweet potato that I didn't love. And then I tried regular gnocchi the following day, and I do not like it. It is just not my jam. They ate it, all of them, and it was so good. My husband said that it was like restaurant worthy. So I will take it.
Amber, a win is a win. I love
I
that.
will take it.
I will
And it
take
was so
that.
easy.
Yeah, it was easy, I will say that. So it's a people pleaser. I love that he loved it. I also love that you went out of your way to double check your gnocchi tolerance, and if we ever do another one of those again, I will think of something else for you, and you will love it. We could just make straight up pasta next time. We'll make spaghetti. So, that
It's fine. I love the process. I enjoy feeding people. Like
yeah.
I don't love cooking, but I love the way it makes me feel when people eat what I cook.
Mhm.
So it was a good experience overall. And I feel so accomplished that I like, hey, I made this with my hands from scratch. So it was pretty cool.
I love that our pre-production call made you feel accomplished, that you did that. That makes me feel really good. And it's so funny because as you're mentioning, like I love feeding people. I'm also wondering if that almost transfers to your creative energy in writing and sort of nourishing people with your stories.
Yeah, and, it's something that I never thought would happen. When I wrote my first book, I was pretty much like, "Okay, this is going to be to entertain," right? Like, it's not funny. Like, I wasn't thinking entertaining that way. I was more thinking of like, well, cozy with coffee, in a book. And then I started getting messages from people saying kinda like the impact the story had on them,
Yeah.
and it was magic. And now I like thrive for that feeling. That's what I want now. I'm like, please message me when you finish this book if you loved it and tell me why, because it keeps me going. As you can see, all of my reader mail behind me.
I love seeing the reader mail behind you, and I'm sure that people who see the clips on social media will also see. And as we signed on, I told you that it has such a warm feeling behind you. And I love that you keep the mail there. It's almost like a reminder of the impact and connection you have with people. And I think that's so beautiful. So, Amber, can you tell us a little bit about your writing style and the impact that you hope to have on your readers?
Yeah, so I say all the time that I do write emotional stories with relatable characters who you can both see yourself in and like see a little bit of somebody else in. I call it the mirror and window style. I did not make up the window and mirror theory. I actually used it in my classroom a lot when I was a teacher. And it's what I hope for people to get from my books. It's for them to see themselves in the pages of the book, but also feel like, hey, this could be my best friend telling me about something, or a partner, or someone that they are sharing the bus or the train with. So I really strive to make flawed characters who are just everyday, regular people. And I really hope that readers can not only see themselves and others in it, but also find some healing through my stories too, if that's the part of the journey that they're in.
Well, I read your book, This Season Long Awaited, and I opened it, right? Like I'm diving in. I actually didn't look into much of what it was about. I wanted to just sort of cold open
Oh,
dive into it. No, but I loved that about it because it was so instantly immersive. And I really am getting what you just shared about those raw, relatable characters that you can see yourself, but almost a little uncomfortable that you could see yourself in some of the flaws. And I definitely want to have a conversation about flaws because I think it's a big thing in the book world right now where there's like a little confusion, a little controversy, some big feelings about it. But personally, I love flawed, very human characters. And one of the ways that I was seeing you show this to us in the book was through the dialogue and also the internal monologue of why did I say that? Why did I do that? And it was that thing that we all do of sort of second guessing the thing that just came out of our mouth and almost like we can't stop ourselves sometimes. I thought that was so beautiful, and you instantly had me hooked. Like chapter 1, I was like, "What's happening with these 2 people?" So, it's just an incredible thing when you're opening a book and you can someone can sort of invite you into that world, and they're doing world building also not just through, like, descriptions of the scenery, but through the emotions and how people are responding and reacting to each other. I feel like that's really powerful writing.
thank you.
So I'd really love to shift into that discussion of flaws. Why is it so important for you to incorporate the flaws into the story, to make them so real and relatable versus super polished? Like, why do you want people to feel themselves in it and then kind of cringe a little and then root for them and have those full range of emotions?
So when I wrote my first book, I was really excited. I wrote it. It was never supposed to turn into a career. It was never supposed to turn into this passion that I found that I now can live without. And now all I have all these stories in my head that I have to get out. And my debut is called The Truth Never Spoken. And it has two very flawed characters who made decisions without talking to each other when they were real young. And 10 years later, they kind of go back together. So it was really important for me to show that in those 10 years that they were apart, they grew and they learned how to communicate better and how, all these things that we also go through life. And I finished the book and, reviews started coming in. And back when I read reviews, because I don't do that anymore, but back when I read reviews, there were a few things of like, I wish they would have done this, or I wish they would have talked about this, or I cannot believe he did that, or I cannot believe she did that. And it took me a long time after to just be kind of like, but that was their story and that's the way they were. And I struggle with my like positionality on, are these the stories that I'm meant to tell, or that's just happened to be that one story? I started writing my second book and I tried my best to make them perfect. And I was like, they're going to have an external conflict and they're going to start falling in love as they're like going through this. And it just wasn't working. Every single time I sat down to write, it was like it wasn't them, because my characters to me are real people, and real people have layers and layers and layers. We all have wounds. We all have joy. We all have things that make us who we are. We all have weaknesses and we all have strength, and we are all worthy of love, not despite of them, but because of them. And it's really important for me to showcase that no matter what your weakness or your strength is, you can find love, you can find companionship, you can find community, you can find someone who would be able to see you for who you are, all of you, and be there with you and grow with you. I There is a quote I used to have in my classroom all the time that says, "You grow by what you go through." And that is what I want to portray in my stories mostly. So then after that, I was like, I'm just going to embrace this, that this is what I write. It's just flawed characters who are finding their happily ever after. And it is uncomfortable, especially when you see yourself in one of the characters.
Right.
And I am a firm believer that there are so many books and so many readers and so many books out there that are for each reader.
Mhm.
And maybe you're not ready to sit down and read one of my books if you're seeing a lot of your own weaknesses and strength in the pages of mine now. But maybe in 5 years you will. And maybe in 10 years, you'll be like, hey, I remember reading this one book one time and I wasn't ready to face myself in these pages, but now I am.
That's so powerful. And I was just thinking about a talk I once listened to, and it was about intimacy and vulnerability. And the person speaking had a very different approach to it. And they were saying sometimes it's allowing yourself to be in a situation where you don't know what's going on. You don't have the info on everyone. You're a little uncomfortable. You're a little uncertain. And you sit there a moment or 2 moments or 3 moments longer than you're comfortable with. And that little space, that little snap, that discomfort that you sit through and breathe through, like that's where the intimacy and vulnerability comes in. And I thought that that was really powerful. It really changed how I viewed it and took it actually outside of the romantic version of intimacy and vulnerability, of just the vulnerability of being human and allowing myself to read a story or be in a situation or look at something that does stir up that discomfort where I have to say, am I even 1% like that? Am I 100% comfortable with that? Is this making me think about the thing that I assured myself I was right about, but now I'm looking back and saying, could I have handled that different? So I really think your approach is so beautiful of looking at it and saying, these stories about growth. So there's a parallel process with the readers who are also allowed to grow along with me. And you're allowed to come back and find me later on as well if this is stirring up something that you're not ready to face. And that's such a beautiful back and forth, sort of a call and response between you and the audience. And so when we're talking about intimacy and vulnerability, what has writing these characters maybe taught you about those two words that, you know, that maybe you think about it a little bit differently now than you did before you sat down and started writing?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you actually mentioned intimacy and vulnerability because I portray myself to the world as a very like open, vulnerable person, but I actually am not that vulnerable and that open. I am very vulnerable and open with the things that I want to show you. So it definitely, with every book, it feels like I'm letting a little bit of my heart into the pages. And I say always, actually, my friend Emily Rath taught me this. The book belongs to me
Mm.
while I'm writing it, while I'm editing it. And then the minute I hit publish, that book does not belong to me anymore. This book belongs to all of you. And making that like conscious decision of like, hey, these characters are not mine anymore. This piece of my heart that I put in this book, this piece of myself that I'm opening to show you, it's now yours to process in whatever way you need to. So the story keeps changing as every person understands it differently. But it also has shown me writing that there is vulnerability and intimacy with yourself before there is with a partner. And sometimes, and especially like in romance books, you have these two people who are growing individually or more if you're reading a white choose. And then they grow together and they found that intimacy together as they are also learning who they are. And I have found so many pieces of myself that sometimes I thought I was very healed already. And through writing, I'm like, huh, I guess we're all growing here. Mm, Me too. So it has been very cathartic and it has been very also helpful, very insightful too. I have a friend who reads all of my books and she knows me in real life like very well. And she says always when she finishes, she's like, I always love trying to find what Amber you put in here. She can always like pick and say like, oh, this is what you added from yourself in this book. And it's usually very on point that I'm like, yeah, that is the conscious decision I made to put in that book.
Well, that's a beautiful, intimate experience to have with someone who knows you so well and reads your work and can engage with you. And I'm sure that I don't know, I just feel I guess the word that's coming to me is acceptance. And when I think of the word acceptance, I feel really good. Like I feel really safe in that. And I think it's rare. I think it's special. I think it's powerful. I think it grounds us when we feel like we can be our whole embodied self, flaws and all, creative expression and all, in front of another person. And what a beautiful experience to have. I love that you have that. And I love that somebody reads your work and thinks about that. Well, I want to take a step back because you invited us into that first part of the process where you're saying, I wrote my first book and who knew that it was going to be this? But you've expanded so much. You've written quite a few books. Can you take us into that journey of, I've put my first book out, but now I'm expanding the world that I'm building? What goes into that?
Yeah, so for my first book, it was supposed to be, like I said, a standalone, a one and done thing. There is a friend group in it. And the more I wrote, the more they started speaking to me. So then I was like, okay, so now I need to expand this a little bit. And the more I write, the more stories I have to tell. And it's the most like fulfilling, but also scary thing because there's just not enough time in the day to put them all down. And I do struggle sometimes that I'm like, but what if I'm meant to write this right now, but I don't have the time to write it right now? Is it going to disappear from my brain? So it has kind of turned into that. And now I have fallen completely in love, not only with writing, but also with sharing different type of like characters and personalities in each book, which has made me be a little bit like it's almost like falling in love too. Like I have fallen in love with the process of creating not only love stories, but also the world around them. And now I'm hooked. Somebody asked me the other day, like, would you ever consider writing anything else? And I was like, no, I don't think so, because I love the world building that goes into like a small town or a cozy romance, the characters, their backstory. That is where I have the most fun. And I am just in love and very thankful that I get to do this.
One of the things that you just said, I really want to touch on. You were talking about the characters speaking to you. Now, the listeners of this podcast are not all writers. I'm sure at some level we all have creative energy in our lives. But when it comes to something inside of us speaking to us, I feel like that's a universal experience. And we're all on different parts of our journey. Some of us are surrounded by noise that dulls that, inner voice that's trying to speak to us and call to us and encourage us to do something. Some of us are surrounded by people, much like your friend, who see us and they encourage us and they want us to express ourselves. What would you say to the listener who can almost like faintly hear that voice inside of them speaking to them, calling to them to do something, change something, be something, embody something, but they're not quite ready to let it out yet? And I know that that's like a big ask for you. I'm asking you to like drop into this emotional space, but yeah, what would you say to that person? Whether it was about relationships, health, finances, creative, like whatever it is.
So I am very big on listening to your gut. And like we all have this little part of ourselves that kind of guides you into what, not necessarily what you're meant to be, but even on like speaking to what you should or what you feel like it's right.
Mm.
And a lot of times we have a little bit of that, like, but what if, or we're scared, and that's why we don't take action. And I'm going to tell the listener the same thing that I tell my kids and do it scare. Do it anyway. Because the worst thing that can happen is that you hate it and then you tried it. But the best thing that can happen is that you find a new passion, that you find the piece of your life you didn't know it was missing. You can find that with whatever it is that you're being called to do, you're not only not changing your life, but you're touching on on other people. And there is something magical about that. And there is a reason you're hearing that voice. And it's really interesting because my brain is usually quiet. Like there's not usually like I don't have an inner monologue. I don't have a lot of like noise. It's more of like visual. But once I'm in silence, which I feel like nowadays 2026, we don't do that a lot. We don't just sit with ourselves, right? There's always some sort of outside stimulus, always. But when you sit in the silence, like what is that gut telling you? What are you feeling? And then listen to it and then do it scare. And if you need the permission to do it, I am giving you the permission now. Take it.
I think that's what so many people need to hear. And I think it's so beautiful when one of our favorite writers is sharing that with us and taking the time to just pause and remind us to do that. So I appreciate that you're willing to talk about that because I feel like you're having this experience, sort of like a magnified experience of listening to a voice, right? Not just doing the thing privately, but then doing the thing and sharing it with the world, which is a whole other beast and journey in and of itself, which we'll talk more about in a moment. But I want to dive in to some of the topics that I've seen come up on your social media that you've been talking about. And one of them was fat phobia and how people respond to characters and almost the parasocial relationship we have, even with characters that we didn't write. And some of the internalized thoughts and feelings and programming we have that books invite us to reflect on. Sort of like what you said at the beginning of the episode, like people are opening the books and maybe seeing something that's confronting to them, like internalized misogyny or internalized fat phobia. So let's drop into that for a moment and talk about why you're making the choices you are and how you're sharing these characters with your readers.
Yeah. So, I get a lot of comments on both ends of the spectrum, right? I get a lot of readers with very diverse body types who are very thankful that I'm writing characters who look like them, who look different than them, who shows a little bit of like different ways that the body can look, right? Right now, I am writing a female main character who has poor healing in her scars. So she has keloids.
Mm.
And it is very important for me, I also have keloids, to represent them in its entirety, right? Like I can be empowered by them, like I am sometimes. And sometimes I'm like, I don't want to wear this because I can see it. And it doesn't mean that I dislike myself or that I hate them or anything like that, but I am allowed to exist in both. And then I have some of the readers that take it to the complete opposite end of where if you look like this, then why are you with a person who looks the complete opposite of you? Or I got a lot of comments on my book that released in November, The One Final Rule. She is plus size and she is also tall. And he is also tall, but he is more of like that. He's more slim. They are both very fit characters in the story. She's actually like very competitive. And so many people didn't even comprehend that she could be both plus size and fit and be with someone regardless of what he looked like. So I get a little bit of both. And it's really hard sometimes to like walk the fine line of, am I showing you diversity or am I teaching you about diversity, right? Because it is never my intention to teach you anything that you're not ready to learn, because that is not what I'm inviting you here for. It is not my place to be like, you need to be more open minded about the way that people's bodies looks because we're all different. And a lot of my readers are in the United States, where sometimes I feel like we forget that we are not the only country in the world and there are diverse everywhere else. And people who have lived in different places, in different countries with different communities can see that because they are open to that diversity. But that is not always the case. And I have come to the realization that first, you cannot make everyone happy. And as long as I am not causing any harm and I am taking care of my characters and showing them in the true light of who they are, then my job here is done. And now it's up to you to realize, what do you want to do with that? And sometimes it's a lot of, well, I don't want to see this because I don't see myself in this. And that is not up to me to figure out. I did say at the beginning of the episode, I hope you see yourself in these characters, but also my characters have their own journey. And sometimes you are just meant to be the spectator. Sometimes you are just here to see what they're going through. And if your body type or even your mental health doesn't look the way that my characters do, then it's fine because we're all different, right? And I really also like to portray fatness in its spectrum. Last year, well, I guess the year before in 2024, I had the Give Rarely Given come out, and the female main character is also plus size. And she is like the complete opposite of Daisy, the one in the one final rule. Livy is, she's shorter, she's very comfortable in her skin, she loves her body the way it is. She has zero problems speaking about her fatness, speaking about it, telling people about it, has no problem. She's very straightforward. She is pretty much, she will call you out on it too if you're making a comment that she thinks it's unfair. And Daisy, who is actually falling in love with her brother, with Livy's brother, um, it's the complete opposite, where she loves herself, but her body has changed through the years. Like she wasn't always plus size. So she still struggles a little bit with like accepting that that's the way that her body looks. It doesn't make her any less of a great character just because she is not completely accepting every part of her. She's not self deprecating. She's not self hating. But when she takes a moment and says, hey, I have to hop 4 times before I can put these pants on because they won't go over my belly, it's okay to take that moment and do it. Sometimes I love clothes, so I'm always, like, finding cute outfits, and I love the way it makes me feel, and I have learned how to dress to enhance the part of my body that I wanna show, right? But I also have chronic illness, like some of my characters do, and sometimes my body can drastically change from one day to the other, depending of if I'm bloated or the way, my medicine is making me feel, and sometimes I'm in a lot of pain, and I don't wanna wear tight clothes, and I don't wanna feel uncomfortable all day, and if I'm having those thoughts and I deserve love and I deserve companionship, I am going to put those in a book because someone out there is having them too. And they deserve to see, hey, I'm not alone in this. And that goes with, you know, a myriad of things for my characters too. In that book, The One Final Rule, she also has PCOS, and there's a few of her PCOS symptoms that affect intimacy. And there is a on-page discussion about them. And the amount of readers that have messaged me saying, like, hey, I have noticed this, and I did not know that it was because PCOS. Like they know they have PCOS, they know they have the symptoms, but because it is not widely spoken about, they had not put like the connection together, right? And even though I never meant to teach about it, it ended up being a learning opportunity for them, and it has changed their life for the better. So if I can do that, then, my job here is done. And I really hope that we can all take a step back and say, like, why is this bothering me right now? And go from there. And in the meantime, I'm going to protect my mental and my personal space. And if you are coming to my space with hateful comments, I will block you because that is not what I'm here for.
Amber, that was so beautiful. I would like to unpack a few things that you just mentioned. And one that I was hearing is something I've talked about on the podcast before, almost this expectation that women will use a currency of shame to navigate the world. So we can have something wrong with us as long as we're ashamed about it. We can have a different body type, or we can have a different level of health or ability, but it's okay if we're ashamed. But if we embody it, if we feel grounded, if we feel safe, if we feel okay, if we create a life that, moves with us instead of against us, that's a problem. And I think it's really beautiful when in these stories, you're sharing with us perhaps the first time that a reader has ever witnessed someone feeling that way, because they might not have been aware that they're allowed to. Shame is very powerful, it can shape our lives. And so when you're writing characters who they're just not burdened by it, they're living their lives and they feel okay with it, I think that that has a huge impact. And I feel like we can minimize books, right? We can minimize fiction, be like, oh, it's just a story. But I'm like, but it might be the first time you've ever read something, and it might change your life. It might change how you feel in your body with your fluctuating health. I mean, your health can be one thing one day and change the next. No one knows that better than me this last year. So it can change all of those things. Another thing you just touched on, which sort of brings us back to something we said earlier, is about intimacy and vulnerability. And it doesn't always have to be sexualized. I think it can be really beautiful in these stories when we're reading and seeing for the first time someone feeling really safe to share things with their partner. I almost think that there's this assumption that we have this pamphlet that we're born with of how to navigate intimacy or sexuality, given all the myriad of things that we can experience in our lives, and we just haven't. Sometimes we don't know how to tell someone what we need or what we want or what we're scared about or what we're insecure about. And so I feel like that can really be the impact of these stories. Kind of like you're saying, I'm not teaching you, but I'm showing you. And if you're along for the journey, you might get something out of it. Everything is grist for the mill. And you could pick up a book and have your mind blown, right? That you didn't know that you were going to learn about having these types of conversations or feeling safe in your skin or communicating when you don't. So I just love that we're having this conversation because I think it's really impactful.
Thank you. Thank you. And I have there is one of my characters in the book is The Lies Always Told. And that one is like my heaviest, most emotional book ever. And they have a very physical relationship at the beginning. So it's very much intimate, but not with the heart, just with like the body. And there comes a point in the book where she is pushing him away, not physically, but like with what she's feeling. And he tells her, like, you are trusting me with your body. Trust me with your heart too. Trust me that I'm here to like listen, right? Even if you think it's something that I don't want to. And she had some like physical scars that she like is not ready to talk about. And it passes so long between that conversation until she actually like gives it all to him. And I think I had a lot of readers with that book that were like, "Oh, she was so vulnerable with him after he like allowed her the space." And sometimes that's what we need. We just need the space until we're ready. So in the meantime, let the stories guide you until you are ready to do whatever it is that you need. And it's the same reason why I tell people very much from the beginning. Like if you open my book and you go to the author's note, it will tell you from the beginning what you're going to find in this story. I try not to tell you any spoilers, but I don't ever want you to open up like that book that Lies Always Told
Mhm.
if you're not in the mental space to read the book. Like that is never what I would like for anyone to go through. So and at the end of each of my books, I'm like, okay, if you finish this and you're feeling a little heavy and you want some lighthearted read, this is where you can go. Or if you're like feeling in a really good mood, but now you want to go, destroy your soul, here is where you can go.
Oh, I love that, Amber. I think that's really beautiful, and it's a thoughtful way to engage with your readers. I do highly recommend that people read the author's note and trigger warnings. I'm seeing a lot of people very surprised when they read books and it's there at the beginning. So that's just my little PSA of it is there, and it is important. And learning about boundaries is not just about other people, it's about the boundaries with ourselves and how do we take care of ourselves. And in what way are we not? In what way are we self sabotaging? And I think if you're an avid reader and you love these stories, I think that that's a tool to lean into to, pick up what the writer's given you and really take a moment to take a look at it. And it's not exclusionary, it's actually an invitation to say, does this work for you? Is this okay? And I really love how you've been speaking about this. And I get the feeling that a reader could be like, oh, I'm not in the right space right now, but I'm going to come back to it.
I read something sometime that said something of the lines of like, your book description should do both invite people who want that to read it, but also repel the people that don't. And that is like one purpose in life. I'm like, I want you to read this story if you want to read this story. Mind you, there is a fine line too, because when you are a person of color, when you are a queer author, which I'm not, but it happens with like all of the minorities, person of color, an immigrant, queer, and longer list. Sometimes there's less visibility, not sometimes, most of the time, there's less visibility than when you have, a predominantly white story. And it is something that is sometimes uncomfortable to hear, but it is the reality. So this is not a call for, well, I want to stay away from these stories because I don't see myself in them because these characters look different than me. Like, this is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is, like, for example, I have one trigger, one, and I cannot read on page high risk pregnancy. So every time I read any book, I am going to go to that trigger list or that author's note or the content warning. So I can go see if it has that. And if I cannot find it, sometimes I have emailed the author. If it's a story that I know has a pregnancy, right? I have emailed the author or posted it on social media, say, has anyone read this? And is there high risk pregnancy here? And I was actually reading a book and I could see that it was going there. Like, I could see it, right? And I actually paused it. I was listening to it. I paused it and I went and just did a little quick Google search and found that it had. And I got out of there very quickly because I knew that it wasn't for me. And it is my job as the author to make sure that the information is out so we can all respect the boundaries that we need in order to be healthy. But also, it is my job as the reader to say, hey, let me take a look at this that the author is giving me so I can make sure that this is the story that I'm meant to be reading right now.
Oh, you said that so well. Again, it's an invitation. It's not like homework. It's saying, hey, I'm inviting you to be part of this experience and for you to check in with yourself and see if that's okay. And one of the other things that you just touched on is the experience of being a writer of color, of what that's like writing multicultural characters, of the reader response. And what I want to touch on is a topic that we very much saw on Threads at the end of the year as people were posting their year-end reading lists and all the new writers that they'd read that year and the books that they loved. And it was almost an invitation to reflect and say, what are my reading choices? Am I diversifying the characters that I read, the writers that I read? But then I'm also looking at it from the perspective of someone who's writing multicultural characters and writing interracial relationships. What is that experience like for you?
So I wrote The Truth Never Spoken, my debut, because I wanted a character who looked like me finding a love story with someone who looked like my husband. We are in an interracial relationship where he is a white American boy from a small town. His grandparents are all immigrants from Europe, and I am Dominican, and I grew up in the Dominican Republic. And when you have two people, it doesn't matter their background. There's going to be miscommunication. There's going to be things that get lost, right? Because we're all raised differently. We all have different backstories, and when you're trying to blend that together, it's going to happen. But when you add the layer that now you also not only have two different like upbringings, but you also have two different cultures, two different languages, so much can get lost. So I have kind of embraced the miscommunication trope and into the point of where like they are going to miscommunicate. It's going to happen. And it's just trying to figure out how are they fixing that? How are they going to communicate after? So the whole writing started because of that, because I really wanted a small town romance that had an interracial relationship in it. And there are definitely some authors out there who write those, but not that many. So it just kind of started like that. And then it has continued into me embracing that interracial and multicultural relationships. And I love it. I love representing them. It is my community. It is what I'm living. But last year, so the end of 2024, I was seeing all the wrap ups. I had 3 books out. And even though my books were not in a lot of the wrap ups, what bothered me was that there were not a lot of books like mine in a lot of the wrap ups that I was seeing. So I knew 2 things. One, that a lot of readers don't diversify their reading. And number 2, who was I interacting with? That all I was seeing was the same type of wrap-ups, right? So it came to both like an acknowledgement that this is something that happens in the community, but also an accountability piece of like, am I doing what I'm preaching about too? In February of 2025, I was in panel. It was a multicultural panel with amazing authors. And one of the authors there was Adib Karam, and he writes interracial romance as well. And he said something that really stayed with me. And I kind of have shifted the way I consume any art since. He says that you need to keep checking on yourself to make sure that you are also reading diversely. And it goes beyond just reading diverse authors, but also diversity in stories. And he was like, I have a spreadsheet and I keep track of this. And I was like, I'm going to do that. So I sat down with my wrap up because I'm a big reader as well. And I know that we all authors started writing because we love reading, but I still make it a priority of mine to read a lot of books. And lastly, I wrote down all of the books that I read in 2024. And then I started kind of like labeling them by author, by type of story, and by usually tropes. I am going to say we all have our preference in the type of stories that we like to read. So, like, I love to read contemporary romance. I don't branch out too much out of contemporary romance. I read a couple thrillers a year. I read like maybe one dark romance a year, and I read a few nonfiction. But I stay pretty much in my contemporary. That's kind of where I live. I think I read one fantasy last year too, and one historical. So you know what I mean? Like we all know what we love to read, and I am not telling you go out of your way and read things that you don't want to read. But out of all the contemporary romance that I was reading, like 99% of them were MF romances. I had a couple that were white choose, and then I had one MM, so two male main characters, and then I had no FFs. I have no female and female main characters books that I read in 2024. So I looked at that and then I looked at like what about the authors, right? And I was doing a decent job at diversifying my authors a little bit, but I in 2024 I read no books by another Dominican author, and that is not okay. That is unacceptable. So in 2025, my goal was to diversify my reading completely, but also diversifying my feed. I started making a conscious effort into following creators who were reading diverse romance, who were reading diverse stories, so I could go also not only see what they were reading, but also creating community amongst them. So for this year's end of the year wrap ups, my feed looked very different. I had a few readers who were pretty much, reading the same very famous stories that are mostly white MF romances. Um, but then I noticed that my feed was more and more diverse because I was making the conscious decision and effort to seek that, you know, and if I am not making that effort, who's going to do it? So I really do want readers in general to like take a step back and sit in that uncomfortable space of, am I bringing this? And the only thing that is going to do, one, is going to help you support people who might not get the support that other authors get. The second is going to open up your reading taste, is going to open up the type of stories you consume, is going to open up your empathy, is going to give you so much, and it is so worth it. And you should 100% do it. My reading in 2025 was so rich because of this. And I really hope, we can always do better. So I really hope that next year is the same. And I am going to take a little bit longer. And I'm also going to invite to anyone who's reading this who is a parent or who is a teacher or who is an adult that has some sort of influence on a child in their life to also diversify their reading. I want you to look at your classroom library and take inventory and see what are you showing the kids? Because nothing is ever going to affect me more than the one year I had a student in my classroom. I'm going to cry. Then the one year I had a student in my classroom who looked at a book and picked it up and said, she looks just like me. And that little girl is going to grow up one day to find my stories and say, I look just like her. And for that is so worth it because so many of us have never seen that before. And so many of you have only seen that. And we all deserve to be represented in stories, in all type of stories. So I'm giving you homework. Go do that.
That's the good homework, Amber. And I really, really appreciate the way you explored that topic. And it is, like I said, so many things we've talked about in this episode, they're an invitation. It's not instructions, it's an invitation. And I think when someone receives it that way of like, oh, I'm being welcomed in to this space to do this, that's a privilege. That's beautiful. And I love that we talked about it. I think you and I both need to take a second to have a breath before because we're both kind of
Yes.
like tearing up.
Yeah, it's also like my love letter, which I know is getting close to me reading
Yeah,
it, made me cry when I wrote it, so I am gonna cry. It's fine. Um,
you're okay.
Tears are welcome here, but I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Here's our welcome here. That will be the new tagline of the podcast. It used to be for anyone who loves a good story, but Ambar Cordova just wrote a new one for me. So I appreciate that. Well, Ambar, first of all, obviously, based on our last experience, I feel like I could talk to you all day, but I'm not going to because I'm going to be mindful of our time together. I would like to set aside some time to talk about your next books and things that are coming out this year. Because again, I'm like a little silent social media stalker. I'm always liking your posts and picking up on the things that you're talking about. And I was really moved about some of the stories you were talking about. So, can you give us a little teaser of what's to come?
Yeah, so my next release comes out February 25th of 2026. It is called The Hope Once Lost. It's a very emotional, vulnerable story of single mom who is a widower who married the love of her life in high school. Well, not in high school, but they dated in high school, grew up together, married really young, and then he also passed really young. And her hero is a man who is also dealing with grief and learning how to find joy after. It is a romance with a happily ever after, but it's a very hard earned happily ever after. It is my love letter to all of the single moms out there who are raising children while being a little brokenhearted. And I just want to tell you that I see you. It is also the last book in the Baker O series. It can be read as a standalone, but it is the ending of this, world that changed my life. So it's very emotional for everyone, I feel like. Um, and after that, I have so many projects that I really don't know which direction I'm going to go after. I am kind of like letting my heart decide after because I can really go different ways. But I do wanna say, starting in January, so at the end of this month, I will have a serialized story in my Patreon where it is a story that will only be released there first, and that one is really fun. It is a rom-com, so it's a really good time. It definitely still has heavy topics in true Amber Cordova fashion, but it is definitely more of a good time than an emotional roller coaster, I would say.
Well, Amber, I'm so excited. I remember specifically seeing you write about this next book, and something about it just tugged on my heart. And I just knew that this was going to be like one of my next books that I devoured. So I'm really looking
Yeah.
forward to reading that in February. And can you remind us again the title and the date that it will be published?
Yeah, it's releasing on February 25th, and it is The Hope Once Lost.
Incredible. Well, Amber, the name of this podcast is Love Letters and Books. And I always invite my guests to write and read a love letter either to their readers or their younger selves. So I would like to just give you the floor and have you share your love letter with all of us.
Yeah. Dear little Amber, you're 34 and happy now. It's important you know that first. Yes, you also became a mom, and although you're not a princess by profession, you married a man who definitely treats you like one. You live in a small town and you love being outside. Yes, with the bugs. And now you're also an author. I know you have a lot of questions, so I'm going to try to answer them all. You fell in love with romance novels after you saw that no matter what the characters go through, they live happily ever after. No, not every love story is a romance. It's important you also know that. And you find so much comfort in romance that you decide to give it a shot. Yes, you've written books, 9 of them now. You've published 7 of them. It is so hard, but you love it so much. And what is that we say? Do it anyway, which you definitely do. You've traveled all over the country to meet readers and not only talk about books, but dance with them too. How cool is that? You didn't land in this beautiful career by accident, but by a million little events, both big and small, that shaped your life into what it is today. You're going to go through so much happy, sad, hard, easy, fulfilling, and things that will make you question every choice you've ever made. You'll meet many people and experience a wide range of things. It is very important that you know that you'll grow by what you go through, and all of that will lead you here. You're going to fall in love with teaching and shaping the future generation, and then that dream will shift into sharing love, passion, and healing through your stories with others. You will change so many lives, and in the process, yours will change too. I also want you to know that in the end, it's all worth it. the sleepless nights, the frustration, the research, the figuring it out. Because when you hear the first reader tell you how your story changed their life, or show you their skin permanently inked by your thoughts, or when your kids look up at you with stars in their eyes and tell you how cool is that their mom is an author, or when you meet people on the street and they tell you how your husband was bragging about your books, for every little girl who looks like you that will grow up to find themselves in the pages of a world you created, for every email, letter, message you get of readers telling you how they saw themselves in your stories and they know their happily ever after awaits, you heal a little every time. Always remember there's someone out there whose life you're going to change. So please don't give up on rainy days. The sun always comes out in the end.
Thank you so much, Amber. That was so beautiful. We've both already cried like 5 times during this episode, so we're just gonna take a break for a second and let the tears flow. And I know you wrote that to your younger self, but I also always trust that someone listening needed exactly what you just said. So, Amber, I just want to
Thank
say
you.
thank you so much for being here for the longest pre-production call I've ever done in my entire life, for being so patient as, I was giving you cooking instructions, but we're also setting up your mic and did everything. And I just really, really appreciate your generosity in this conversation because we really did touch on quite a few things. And I'm looking forward to the final book in the Baker Oak series. I'm just so glad you were here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you're interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at lovelettersandbookspodcast@gmail.com.